I was only 24 years. After that, we were in the textile business. And just soon after my father passed away, my brother and I, who were in business together, suddenly were faced with the longest textile strike in the history of the world, when the entire textile industry in Mumbai struck work. So you can imagine that lasted for 18 months. For all those of you who know textiles will say that it is a very high fixed capital intensive business. And if you are shut down for 18 months, there's no way that you can survive, or it is very difficult to survive. Added to this was the fact that in the midst of the strike, my brother, who was elder to me and who was the chairman of the group, suddenly, and he was only 33 years old, developed cancer. And he was a fit person, and one day suddenly we realized that he developed cancer. And in those days, there was no medicine for the type of cancer he had. And in 1 year, he passed away. Those of you who know, have battled with a patient who has, and lived with a patient who has cancer, know the ups and downs and the challenges we face. So what was important, I think, is that we had on one side a strike where the business was really going in through virtual bankruptcy. On the other hand, I had my brother who had 3 sons. The eldest was 11 and the youngest was 3. So you were battling all these challenges. And at that time, one would have thought, how would you survive, and all these thoughts. But when I look back now, that too was not a big deal. It just passed by, because I think human nature has this ability to fight. If we allow ourselves the juices within us, then we must realize that every problem is not as big as we ourselves are in human nature. And I only want to say that it's there for all of us to say, to understand that this too will pass. And we have to fight to get to another day. So in this environment, what should we do? First of all, as I said, let's remember that none of our problems are bigger than us, and we can fight it. And I'm sure that when we look back after a few years, we will realize that yes, it was a challenging time. Nobody says no, but we also came out. Actually, let me say, just to continue our story of my own story, if it was not for the strike in the textile business, we would have never got into pharmaceuticals. And that's where actually the challenge became an opportunity. We could get into a business which was very successful for us. So sometimes adversity also opens the doors to opportunity. It's only, we have to be there waiting to grab these opportunities. So even in these times, sometimes it may look difficult, but I feel confident that all of us will have some opportunity or the other to look ahead. So what does one do in these times? I believe the priorities are simple. First, one has to look at one's own health. Again, to take the example of the flight, when you sit on the aircraft, the air hostess will announce that when there is a fall in oxygen pressure, please first take your own oxygen mask and then help the person next to you. Similarly, in these crises, let's look at health, our own health first. Because if we are not healthy, we can't help anybody. The second thing is that look at the family. How do we get support of the family? How do we support the family as well? Because these are trying times. And sometimes it's not easy for everybody, whether you're in business, whether at home. How do you manage? There's so much uncertainty. I think this is where the value of family. We just read yesterday about the Shashank Singh Rajput. And but I realized that he was living alone. So obviously he did not have the support of a family that all of us have. So let's look at family as a second priority. And the third is in...
Not hearing sound anything.
Sorry? I don't know. The third is that the importance of business. Again, what do we... So I'm supposed to talk a little on business. So let me say what one needs to do in business or what we are trying to do. I don't know. One is, I think today in this time, to focus on liquidity is the most important. It is very important for us to ensure that we have liquidity. There are challenges. You do not have sales. You may not have collections, but you still have expenses. So how do you ensure that liquidity takes place? Therefore, I would just say that we have to be pretty ruthless in to ensure that costs are cut to the minimum. We have to ensure that there is no capital expenditure and try and see however much you can raise money, whether it is raising money through banks, and there are several schemes of banks, some of them work, some of them not, or is there any other way, whether it's equity, whether it is, even if one has to dilute equity at this time, and one may think that the price is not attractive, it's still worth doing because liquidity is very important. And why do I say that is if you survive through this crisis, not all will survive. Actually, we'll have many opportunities once you come out of this. The world has to come out of this. Maybe it will take time. I don't know when, but whenever it does, there's going to be, you will be one of the fewer ones who will survive. And therefore, it'll be, it's like the Darwinian theory, survival of the fittest, but the fittest will have a bigger market opportunity. So liquidity, focus on getting as much as you can is important. Second thing is there are many ways of renewing and re-looking at your business. So can you do new things? I know Farhat is here, but I also know, like for instance, at Taj, they were one of the first ones to start. How can they realize that nobody's going to live in their hotels for a while, but can they start serving food from their kitchens? And that's where you get all these packed foods, you get laundry, and also this is one way. So think of different ways of looking at your business totally differently. Challenge everything that is there in the way your business is being done and see if you can do something different is the other thing that I would say. The third thing is that one has to get digital. I know that we are in the real estate business today, and actually we are now being able to sell digitally. People have not come and visited the place, but if you can take them through walkarounds of your facilities and all through the digital media, it is possible. And many, many businesses across the board have been doing digital. So that's the other way that you can look at it. And fourthly, I think we have to relook at the way we are doing business. I mean, we must accept that, I mean, this work from home and the fact that we have been able to work during this time with, with a different mindset. You may not need as many people. You may not need everything that you were doing, what you thought was essential. So again, let's relook at the way even our existing businesses are concerned. We have to become leaner to survive in this environment. And as actually an aside, how the human mind thinks. If somebody would have told any of us in February, if they ever told me that, for 3 months, 4 months, you can't get out of your house, you're only going to be no going out, no going to meet friends and other family, no going out for restaurants and movies, how would you have survived? You have said impossible. Actually, the time has gone by, and I think we have been able to manage. So that's the other thing that I wanted to share. I want to just end on the other thing that which Rotary, I don't have to preach to Rotarians, but is that how we can give back to society. When Mudit was talking about Viktor Frankl, I think I just want to just elaborate a little bit on that as well. Viktor was one of the psychologists, the doctor, I think he was, which was during the Second World War in the concentration camps. As you know, the Jews were put in the concentration camps, and most of them, or 99% of them, were actually executed in the most, let's say, terrible situations. And here was Viktor Frankl, where he was seeing so many of his family, friends, associates being actually exterminated in front of him. It was a true genocide. And yet, what did Victor do? Victor said that he started serving people, all those people whom he could, to bring them out of that depression, to get them to think positively. And that gave meaning to his life. And that was probably the most important aspect. And he survived through this whole Holocaust and came out as a stronger man. So, can we during this period also give back? We can give back. It's not necessarily money. We can give back in time. We can give back in our talent. We can give back in effort. But this is a time, if we do that, it will mean a lot to the people. You can imagine, I mean, we all say that this lockdown has created a big issue for us. But look at the migrant labor whom you have served. They have no jobs. If they go back to their homes, where will they get the income even to support their families? So if we can help them, it is it will give a lot of benefit to them. It will give a lot of meaning to us as well. So in a very selfish way, if you look at it also, it gives a lot of meaning. I just want to speak about one as we end, something which I found really good. The Prime Minister has identified what he calls as the 115 districts in India, which are the most backward in terms of human development, which is called as the aspirational districts. We realize that these aspirational districts, there's a big difference between the India of the aspirational districts and the India which many of us see or live in. And we realized that during this period, there were many older people who were living there, people above the age of 80, above the age of 60 who were living there, and whose families were, probably their children were working somewhere in bigger towns around. And these were very lonely. So with the government of India and Niti Aayog, we started post-COVID a program which is called the Dada Dadi Nana Nani Suraksha program, where we keep talking to the older people above 60. So we've done this in 28 districts today, where there are about, there were 29 lakh people approximately who were above the age of 60. And we got volunteers and our whole team, we got 30,000 volunteers in these districts, and started just phoning up these people to find out what are their needs, what are their worries. Because what is happening today is that many people don't know. How do you get access to medicine? Or when do you go to a hospital? Or how do you get even rations and food and so on? And you'll be surprised as to the big benefit this has had. And in fact, now the Prime Minister wants us to do it across first the 115 aspirational districts and then across the country. So these are things that all of us can do in one way or the other, whether big or small, it doesn't matter. But if we can all contribute, I think we will get out of this crisis and probably will emerge as something good will come out. I mean, all crises will opportunity. The dawn is the darkest before the dawn is the darkest hour. And I'm sure that there will be a dawn coming back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay bhai. We have time for a few questions before we move on to the next part of the agenda. Does anybody have questions? Munith, how come you don't have the first question?
Yes, no, I'm ready. I was giving others a chance. I'm ready. Ajay, so if you are PM or FM, what would be your impetus to get business back on its feet by policy directions?
I just look at our Chief Minister, Uddhav Thackeray. He was so keen to become Chief Minister before this COVID happened. And after that, I don't know whether he's still happy being that. So I'd rather not be PM or FM. Okay, but on a more serious note, your question was, how do we get back the business? So I think one is that we have to lift parts of the lockdown because that's where it is necessary. Second thing is, I think you have to provide liquidity into the system. I feel this very strongly that government has announced many measures, but they have not yet flowed down. The urgency of that flowing down to the businesses, to the community is not there. I think, as I've said somewhere else before, the urgency that they showed in terms of doing, whatever it is for healthcare, they have to do for business as well to see that that comes. So that is to ensure that supply chain comes. And then you have to increase demand. At the end of the day, demand has to be, is a thing that we need to encourage. And that also means that you have to put money in the hands of people so that they can buy things. Finally, I think there's a big opportunity, I believe, in this Atmanirbhar Bharat. That the self-reliant India. Today, if you look at it, even in our daily lives, I mean, I'm embarrassed at the amount of things that we import, even small things that you're importing for daily use. Do we need to do that? No, I think we have to get it back. We have to get back into India, even if it's closing some of the borders, so what? This is going to happen all over the world. So one of the opportunities I can look at is this, that local industry there will be further demand for. So I would say these are things, but these are all, they have their own constraints, I guess.
We have a next question from Freyas. Freyas, please go ahead. Freyas, would you like to ask the question?
Yes, sorry, my mic was not working. So thank you so much for your thoughts. My question was that we step in really big ways during times of crisis to help those in need. What should we be doing to bridge the systemic gaps and breaks in our processes from today so that tomorrow we don't see another today like this?
So, this, even the most advanced countries in the world could not anticipate what happened today. So one of the reasons has been that actually the investment that has been done in healthcare in our country especially, but even around the world, has not been enough. So for instance, I can tell you the example of antibiotics. Antibiotics, the prices globally came down so much that and people felt that most of the diseases were controlled, that all the research moved from antibiotics to first cardiovascular, heart diseases, then to things like cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, diabetes. But I think these are some basic things like creating vaccines and all is where we will have to spend resources. And this is more done, I think, not as much by the industry as it will have to be done by the government agencies. And in our country especially, we have realized that we've not spent time in terms of developing the health infrastructure. We are spending 1.5% of our GDP on healthcare. I mean, the US is another extreme of like 17, 18%, but Europe is like 8-9%. We can't have 1.5%. We have to do that. We've also realized that, for instance, urban planning is totally awry. Why is Mumbai in this problem where it is in today? It's because there's no urban planning. 60% of Mumbai lives in slums. How can you practice social distancing? How can you practice basic hygiene? So these are the things that we have to invest in.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Priyashri, please go ahead with your question.
My question is that what happens to art, music, and culture during times of crisis? How do they survive?
That's a tough one in terms of But I think at the end of the day, one has to go beyond business. What does art and culture do? Is really gives you art, music, culture, it satisfies at the end of the day the soul. And as I said, when I said that you have to look after your health, it is not only physical health, it's also these mental health. I mean, look at what's happening. If you don't have art and culture, you will not be able to survive. So I guess that yes, in the short term, you may find that prices come down, but ultimately it will evolve. I think people will still, during this period of some of the biggest pain, you'll find the best works of art and the best works of poetry and literature come out. So that's where I think.
SV
Thank
has
you.
a question.
Mr. Piramal, good afternoon. Thank you very much for an excellent talk that you gave us. A lot of food for thought. My question is, you raised three very valid points. One is about the government should give a lot more liquidity. You also mentioned about the pathetic urban planning in cities, hardly any expense on the budget in health. Now, my question to you is, just as Mr. Nandan Nilenkani, after his Infosys stint, did a stint and set up Aadhaar, which all of us are very proud of and using. Do you think that more industrialists must perhaps offer themselves to come to Delhi and use their very rich and varied experience to contribute to various things, various issues? What are your views on that?
So Farhat, I think people would be willing to do that, but it is for the system to invite them. It is for the political leadership to invite people, and then for, frankly, the bureaucracy to allow them to function. You know, even in Nandan's, the Aadhaar case, if you remember, that he had worked so hard for it for 8 or 10 years in the previous regime. And somehow or the other, because of politics, it was skittled. Fortunately, it got revived in post 2014. So similarly, I think if the government wants to, and if the bureaucracy allows, there will be many great talents available. This has been done earlier in, post-independence. A lot of people from the industry were involved in planning and in implementation. I wish they do it again, but it's really, for the representatives, elected representatives and bureaucracy to allow that.
Thank you.
Dilip Dalal has the next question.
Ajay bhai, your talk was very good, but I have a very typical question. Today we have seen migrants going away. Now what happens if the migrants want to come back? How do we quarantine them? And where do we quarantine them? Because a lot of people, like today, my cook, my driver, they've gone away, they want to come back. Now I don't have a place to quarantine them.
So my feeling is that they will come back once it goes down a bit, the virus or the spread of the COVID-19. They will come back, and you will have to just, you will take them, probably do some basic tests and take them. That's the only way I can see that happening. You know, there is no other way. There's no place to quarantine so many people, and it cannot go on for long. Even they won't be allowed to be quarantined, frankly.
No, because we are not sure whether when they are coming by train or plane or however they are coming, are they infected or not? And if they are, and they will infect.
So I think what people are doing is there's nobody has the right answer. I'll just tell you what people are doing is that they're seeing their temperature, they're getting probably their chest X-rays done, but and showing the doctor. But it is not a foolproof way, I can tell you that. But over time, I guess that when you find that this whole thing has subsided, that's the time when they'll come.
Farhat has a question. Of course, we can't deny him.
Thank you.
Farhat, please go ahead.
You've authored two wonderful books. One, of course, Light Has Come to Me, which has got management lessons inspired from Bhagavad Gita. I've had a chance to read it, and it's really, really wonderful. The second one, of course, is The Dance of Life, which is based on Indian stories, inspired from history of Indian science with the Sarabhais. When do we expect the next book from you.
I don't take much credit actually. Swati does most of it. I may have just.
Oh, those are wonderful books. You co-authored them and authored them. They're really, really interesting.
Oh, I don't know now. I wish you know what? I thought during this lockdown there'll be some time to do things which you normally don't do, but I don't know. I find myself as busy, if not more.
Perhaps soon, sometime.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, if I may be allowed to ask one question.
Yeah.
You know, we've been hearing a lot about questions about migrant workers, the drivers, when, how, all those things. But I am asking a question which is from a long-term perspective, that I know there is no solution or answer to that, but this is an opportunity I feel we need to work, and probably also what the PM is looking at. From a long-term perspective, whether the country should move towards not having the concentration in cities to make the rural India self-sufficient. Of course, there are issues over there about agriculture, water, and very many issues about education, the general infrastructure, the want of the youngsters to the attraction to Mumbai especially is great, you know, with the Bollywood and the lifestyle here that they see on television. With that perspective, with keeping all those factors in mind, what according to you would be a kind of a long-term solution for India to do?
I think, Peter, when you've raised a very relevant and very important question, even I think that we cannot have so much of migration into our cities. And the more and more that we support our rural India is where the future lies. And I think to some extent, this is what the government is trying to do. When I spoke about the aspirational district, that's what they're doing. If you work in the aspirational districts, which we are doing in health, education, we are far behind. But if they come up, then there's going to, our GDP in the country can go by 1.5%, 2%. So we have to see that. The other thing about the investment in rural roads, the investment in housing that's happening is also significant. Third thing, very important, is this whole agriculture reform. Actually, many people have not talked about it, even I should have. That is going to open huge opportunities for the farmers and actually for the country. If we are one of the most fertile lands actually in the world, and we can use this as a big source of creation of income for these people. So we will have to think. It's not feasible what we are doing today. I think we have to take a lesson out of this. I also feel, frankly, that maybe 20-30% of the jobs in migrant labor will be disappeared for life. I think many of us who use migrant labor also realize that you can work, we can live with lesser people than what we've done before.
True, and I would like to share with you over here that in this year we did a few projects in which covered 4 villages near Nashik, where we tried to, they had the water source close by, but they couldn't use it. So we did a holistic project which was kind of a development of the village as a whole, taking care of water supply, solar power, agriculture, education, health, everything. So I think that is the answer going forward, because we can't continue in the way we are doing now.
Absolutely. So in some ways, Gandhiji had said that India lives in the villages, and to invest in those, I think we had forgotten it for many years, and it'll come back.
Right.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Yeah, who's that?
Ashok Meenawala.
Yeah, Ashok, I was going to call out your name next.
Ajay bhai, always a pleasure listening to you. I have one question. Actually, what is actually happening on the area of this vaccination? We are listening to a lot of things, and but is it actually happening? Is it coming, or does India going to get any benefit out of it?
So first of all, vaccination, any vaccine actually takes a long time to develop. it's not easy. So if somebody says that I'll get a vaccine in 3 months, 6 months, is not easy to do. And here, nobody understands this virus as well till now, frankly. So when people say there's hope that vaccine will come in 12 to 18 months, let's hope that it will come. Because if I can see the other side, there are some people who say that the virus keeps mutating. So you develop a vaccine for a certain virus, but after some time that virus itself has changed. That's one view, but there are others who say that the vaccine will come. If it comes, it will be available for all, whether we have enough quantity, but I think that's where India is actually the largest producer of vaccines. Rotary knows that better than anybody else. All your polio program was actually provided for from Indian companies. So I think vaccine will come. How soon it will be, I don't know. Probably before vaccine comes, what will have effect would be some drugs that will be used that will contain this. Already there is, so many drugs are there. Remdesivir you've heard of. People will increase its production. There are other trials going on. So I feel that before vaccine, a drug will come, which will control it. And ultimately, yes, vaccine will.
Thank you so much.
Satyan, you have a question? Let's make that as a last question almost.
Sure, thank you. Ajay, very insightful and one of the positive talks we heard during these morbid times actually. So I wanted to ask you, the government comes up with very fancy acronyms and phrases like Atmanirbhar and everything. Do you think there is really that much incentive for innovating, for encouraging innovation in the country to really become Atmanirbhar?
No, I think incentive should come from ourselves, because I feel that if we make people conscious about it, okay, you have to use you have to use products made in India, or that I think itself the demand will come up. So one has to keep talking about it. Actually, if you look at, let's say, they come up with many acronyms, but one of the successful programs has been Swachh Bharat. So similarly, if we make it like a national campaign, keep talking about it. I mean, as I said, I was embarrassed at the amount of goods that are used, which are, of foreign origin. I mean, please look at it yourselves. Today, so many things in your house, furniture, this, that, and the other, all is made. I mean, so much of it is imported. Do we really need it? Can we not substitute it with something made in India? Because what will happen is that will give employment, that will create wealth in the country, and that will help all of us, including us. You yourself will be benefited. So that's how I look at it.
Thank you.
So before I hand over the mic to SV for the formal vote of thanks, Ajay Bhai, I would like to personally thank you for sparing your valuable time with the ever so gracious Swati Bain, and to be politically correct in your club. It's always been an honor and privilege to have both of you with us, and hope that we will, when things are better, we will see both of you more often in the next year in Fali's year and thereafter in all the years going forward. I'm also truly touched with your kind words that you said for Papa. He's always there guiding us and looking after us all, both the Piramal and the Popat families. Thank you. And over to you, SV, for the formal vote of thanks.
Mr. Ajay Piramal, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Bombay, on behalf of our President, Preeti Mehta, all fellow Rotarians, I don't want to make the mistake that, inadvertent mistake that Mudit did. It's an honor to propose a vote of thanks to our honorary Rotarian, Mr. Ajay Piramal. What really stood out to me was that from the introduction, right from the introduction that Mudit gave about you, the amount of social work you've done, it reads much bigger than the undoubted achievements you've done. So that to me was, and it just a selfless kind of work that you've been doing. And one never really hears or reads about it. I mean, that talks about the tremendous humility that comes through and which came through even in your speech. You gave brilliant examples. The example of the airplane, sitting in the airplane, what you do, you look after your health first, you follow what the air hostess says. And again, the brilliant example when there's when the airplane at the ground looks very big, but when it's high up in the air, it looks small, and then you combine it with the problems that we have faced many challenges in the past, and all of us have handled those challenges. That's again a very apt example that you gave us. Indeed, your own business story has been, to use a cliche, has been literally a question of, a phoenix rising from the ashes, taking over a company when you were a business when you were just 24 years old, losing your father, losing your brother, and then, handed over a textile business which was closed down for 18 months. And then the way you turned around the business, turned around the group, absolutely amazing. I mean, I can go on and it'll just not end. With respect to COVID, again, a lot of positive food for thought for us. You talked about focus on health first, family next, in terms of reciprocal. You look after the family, family looks after you. And then last but as importantly, you talked about business. And again, when it came to business, you talked very, very key but simple things which are very extremely important. You talked about liquidity, where cash is the king, that you raise cash whichever way, don't bother about diluting equity. You talked about you talked about revisiting your business completely. You gave the example of Taj, which was an excellent example. You talked about going digital, how in the real estate business, how digital can happen, and how in pretty much in every business it can happen. You mentioned about being lean and mean. And most importantly, you also talked about during these times, how each of us need to look at how do we give back, not just in terms of money, but in terms of time and effort. I am reminded of the Stockdale paradox, which Collins wrote in his book, Good to Great, where here was this vice admiral of US, Stockdale. He was in a Vietnam prison for 7 years. And he looked at it this way: things can't get worse than this. Things can only improve. And that's the way he survived the torture and everything and came out. So the example you gave of the concentration camp person reminded me about it. Thank you again very much, Mr. Ajay Piramal, and look forward to hearing you a lot more. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Manish, over to you.
Leslie, thank you, Preeti. Yeah.
Yes, we just have to conclude a few things. So it's really a pleasure. Manish, over to you.
Yes, so I would now request Preeti to present a token of appreciation to Ajay Bhai for the afternoon he spent with us and the members of this club. The token, of course, will be sent, couriered and physical to you. Preeti would maybe like to brief you on what it is.
Ajay Bhai, this year, at the beginning of the year, before we started, I went to past President Ramesh Narayan. I said that, look, I would not like to give the normal gifts that we give to people, whether on their birthdays or anything, as guest speakers. And therefore, we came up, after a lot of brainstorming, we decided that keeping the spirit of service in whatever we do, we decided that on behalf of every speaker, we would be lighting a rural home with solar power, and a certificate as a memento to say that this is what we have done on your behalf. So that will come to you, and thank you for having lit a rural home.
Thank you. You have done it. Thank you. That's a beautiful gift. So thank you, Preeti Ben. As always, you come up with ideas which help and really, implement what Rotary's beliefs are of service. So thank you.
Thank you. Manish?
Members, please note the next meeting will be again, as usual, an e-meeting. It will be, and there we will have Mr. Harsh Mariwala, who will be presented the Rotary Club of Bombay Ramkrishna Bajaj Award for Good Governance, and he would be speaking thereafter. Statistics, we had a record of 115 participants today in the meeting. And with that, the meeting is now closed. Thank you very much all. Look forward to seeing you all in the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you.